Well, a good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Kanini Talk here on Herman Manyora's YouTube channel. Such a pleasure to always have you on board. Remember, this is your go-to point on matters public governance and everything that is taking place in this country. We want to make sure that we bring you up to date with comprehensive analysis of the same, and that we do pray and hope that these conversations definitely reach our leaders, and of course they will shape the kind of governance that we're witnessing in the country. I'm joined this morning by Wakili Willie Sotieno, who's been here with us and is part of this family. Of course, he's always here articulating issues and definitely speaking without fear or favor. Wakili, how are you?
I'm very fine, thank you very much.
The Finance Act 2023 actually was passed, and therein lays the housing levy that was actually caused uproar among a section of members of the public as well. And it is back. Hardly a day after the High Court, of course, proclaimed itself on the same and termed it unconstitutional. Now it's back in Parliament. A bill has been tabled to make sure that the housing levy, all the kind of measures that are actually necessary for its full implementation are laid therein. Now, questions are being asked. In the first place, why would the High Court term the housing levy unconstitutional, yet allow the government to continue collecting revenue up to the point that they said
that decision was problematic, in my view. The High Court having made a declaration, a determination that the housing levy is unconstitutional and that it violated the provisions of the Constitution. At that point, that same court ought not to have stayed that decision, because this is not a decision made in the interim. This was a decision made in the judgment, the final decision, that I have found this housing levy to be unconstitutional. But then they proceed to give a breather that allows the executive to continue committing an unconstitutionality. So that the High Court, when it has rendered itself on an issue, in my view, as a legal practitioner, once a final order is made by the High Court on an issue, the same court cannot say, but you can continue doing the illegality until January. If any of the parties in the dispute is aggrieved, the only court that, in my view, should have given a stay or suspend the decision would have been a higher court. Because what is happening in between, from the date when the decision of the High Court was made and today, is that, legally speaking, the housing levy is unconstitutional. But the High Court has, in a way, excused and permitted an unconstitutionality to be done by the executive. And it behooves us to ask the question, can a court, or does a court have the power to permit constitutional transgression? I hold the view that a court that has made a determination on constitutionality of an issue does not have the power that permits the commission of unconstitutional illegality. That is what is happening today. If it was the Court of Appeal, I would have said maybe they are yet to render themselves. But in our case, the High Court already rendered itself with finality on the legality of the housing levy. Now, Kenya Kwanza, in their response, are now attempting to introduce a housing levy. And they're using it through a bill. Some of the reasons that led to the declaration of unconstitutionality of the housing levy was the discriminatory nature of its application, the failure to adhere to public participation. Those same issues that were raised in the court that led the court to make a determination are still, you find them in the bill. This bill's development has not been taken through a very deliberative public process. I don't see the provisions of the bill, how it relates to the questions of discrimination between those who are in the informal sector and those in the formal sector. It's not addressed.
But the question of the legal framework upon which the levy was actually anchored is being addressed in Parliament.
No. But there were other issues that the court looked at. Public participation, discriminatory aspect of it. It only targets those in the formal sector and not those in the informal sector. So in coming up with a bill, have they addressed that question of discrimination? That it only applies to those in the formal employment as opposed to those in the informal employment? It doesn't.
So that bill is not addressed?
That bill doesn't address it. That's what I'm saying. The bill itself, to the extent that it is still a bill that focuses on those in the formal sector as a compulsory contributor, it's unconstitutional. So unless they make it voluntary, then it's a different conversation. In a voluntary scheme, anybody can sign up and they pay. But if it is still a bill that is going to purposely target those in the informal employment, then that bill will still be unconstitutional even if Parliament passes it. The quality of public participation they are going to subject that bill to. If the people of Kenya will reject that bill by giving their views on memorandum, will they still insist and pass it as it is, without taking into account the views and representations by the people? Then that bill will be unconstitutional. So one thing that Kenya Kwanza must accept is that Kenyans have overwhelmingly rejected the housing levy in whatever shape or form it is brought, whether as a levy, as a housing tax, as a fund. Kenyans don't want it. They should ignore and let that pass. That is a dead horse. You are not going to stomp it back to life. It is dead. It will never work. And it is better they focus on other things that will make meaningful change to the lives of Kenyans. But Kenya Kwanza has a penchant for failures and failed projects. That is what they know. That's their DNA. So you are going to see them trying so hard to revive this one which is dead, not even in the ICU, to come back to life. Cause more pain to Kenyans.
Okay. The Finance Act is already in action. People are actually now arguing now that the court actually declared the housing levy unconstitutional. What happens to the money that had already been actually collected from that particular kit? Of course, a number of Kenyans had paid, especially the salary grants. This is something that has been taken from their salary ever. So what happens? Are they supposed to be refunded? That
of course, if the collection, even though permissible by the law at the time, you have a legitimate expectation that it should be refunded, or it should form what you call your tax credit. The next time when I'm paying my tax, I should be able to pay less that amount, right? That is a legitimate expectation, because what they had collected has since been found to have been based on an illegality and unconstitutionality. So any Kenyan, let's say the High Court didn't give these stay orders that they gave, any Kenyan would have a legitimate expectation for a refund of that money, or in the absence of a refund, a tax credit, that I can now pay less what you had collected from me as a housing fund. Yes. A
section of leaders affiliated to the government had actually gone to court as well to prevent any Kenyan who would actually demand for a refund of the same. Like seriously, from a legal point of view, how successful could they be in doing that?
In my view, you cannot stop because the claim is personal to me. And I'm simply saying the decision made by the High Court on the legality of the housing fund is a decision that is made in rem. In rem, it means that it applies to everybody. So, to the extent that I paid the money, and the court has since said that the legal foundation upon which that money was collected is unconstitutional, then as the person who pays, I can simply go back to KRA and tell them, hey, wait a minute, you collected money based on this section of the law. This section of the law is unconstitutional. Give me back my money or give me a tax credit. But those who went to court to stop a refund, then they must bring a cause of action for each and every one of us. They must file a suit against each and every one of us who contributed to the housing fund or who are forced to pay for that housing levy. Yes. So that all our voices need to be heard. It is not the kind of a case that in the ideal, a decision can be made in rem. It's a decision that should be personal to those who contributed, and they should all participate. Yes.
How good or bad is the housing levy and the entire housing kind of plan that the government actually have right now? Do you think it's a viable option? Will it actually help solve our housing issues in the country?
Let me explain it this way. The plan by Kenya Kwanza to address the housing challenges of Kenya will fail. It has failed. It cannot work. Simply because, go to Kilimani here today. Kenyans who are living in poor housing conditions are not living in those houses because of lack of houses. There are many houses in Kilimani here which are empty. Nicely done, with amenities, water, running water, electricity, alleyways, pathways, lifts. They are empty here. The problem is that the Kenyan person does not have money in his pocket. They are not able to afford.
Okay.
Now, if you want to address the housing problem in this country, and this is what, as a Sabina, Jimmy Wanjigi and myself, we had fashioned. The housing boom of this country will be private sector driven, not government driven. So that when you are saying you are going to build affordable housing, 1,000 in Kibera, what happens to the person living in Madari? And how many are there in Kibera to begin with? There are so many. There are over 500,000 people living in Kibera. You have put 1,000. You're laughing at them, right? You go and put another affordable housing unit in Omabe. Who cares about a Gorofa building in Omabe? Some people have their land and their homes. You put 600. What is 600 units in Omabe in the middle of town? What is that in terms of population? The best way to address our housing challenge as a country, this is our plan. The government should have moved out of borrowing in the domestic market. Then free the money that the banks are holding. The banks will now be moving all over the country, looking for you and I, to ask us to take credit. The interest rate will collapse, will fall down. If it was like now it's 23%, 25%, the bank will be begging you to take a loan at an interest rate or even 8%, even 7%. With a 7% access to credit facility capital, I'm able to go to Kisumu and put up an affordable housing. Once I identify a need that this kind of, I can put up this house, it's decently done, has amenities, and I have a market niche in Dunga. Let me put it up here. Somebody sees the same in Githunguri, goes and puts up. Another one sees the same in Mandera. Another one in Omabe, another one in Migori, in Taveta. So you are going to see a boom because the banks are now giving their money to private individuals across the country at a reduced interest rate. So all of us individually and in our collective, we are able to access finance at a favorable interest rate. And we are the ones who will be the drivers of the housing boom. But a government-driven housing boom, like they are proposing this ones, what you'll end up with is what in the Soviet Union they were calling ugly mega structures that in the fullness of time is going to break down because they are not thought through. You don't even know which demographic you are targeting to live in that unit. They are ugly mega structures that look like contraptions that will not address the housing problem. In fact, you've just in a way ended up, in my view, what will end up happening in those units, they are going to become high-rise slums. Yeah. Once they become high-rise slums, we no longer now be dealing with ground slums. We'll now be dealing with the question of sanitation. Somebody who is living on the 9th floor of a building, they're living 200 people, 10 people in that house, they don't have running water. They don't have access to a toilet. They have to use a bucket. Because it's not thought through. But if it is private sector driven, I'll be able to build, even as a private sector, a house that will even cost you 800,000 shillings to buy. Or even 600,000 spread over a period of time. Based on a cheap or a low interest rate because you've accessed credit at a low rate. And when you're doing it, there's also what we call the economic component. If this is happening across the country, you imagine the flow of money. I'm doing it in Kisumu, somebody is doing it in Taveta, someone is doing it in Githunguri, another one is doing it in Meru, in Mandera. You are going to see a property boom. So the cement industry, those who are doing quarries, sand, harvesting, those who are providing labor across the country.
Okay.
So steel. Then these are highly manual laborers who build on those sites. You have those who are providing consumables, mandazi, tea. So you're going to see a boom and a quick flow of money in local economies across the country. So and that has an impact on even how much government will collect as taxation.
So in short, you're saying that the private sector stands a better chance of doing this better. It's only now the government needs to create that sort of an enabling environment for them to thrive and do that.
Yes, and the only way to create, as I've said, just walk out of the domestic market. Stop domestic borrowing. And the private sector will take over that responsibility. The banks will be giving the private individuals access to credit at a lower interest rate.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop this conversation at that particular moment. But of course, you've had the kind of conversation that we've had here regarding the housing levy. There is now a bill that has been proposed in Parliament. As well, our eyes are on the ground, and we're waiting to see how things will actually go in that particular, with regards to that particular levy there in the National Assembly. Stay tuned to some of our programs that will be coming up next, and remember that we'll be here to keep you updated with comprehensive analysis that is taking place in Kenya and abroad. Till we have this conversation again, have yourself a lovely day. My name is Evans. Okay.